Mark had always enjoyed the quiet of his small cabin in the woods. It was a simple life, far away from the chaos of the city. The tall trees around him seemed to protect his peaceful existence, and the only sounds he ever heard were the rustling leaves and the occasional bird song. He lived alone, and he preferred it that way. His days were filled with reading, fishing by the nearby lake, and enjoying the beauty of nature. The world outside his cabin felt distant, almost like a forgotten place. For years, Mark had kept to himself, not bothering with the outside world. He had no close friends, no family to visit. It wasn't that he didn't like people. He just felt more comfortable in his solitude. There was something calming about the silence, about not having anyone to answer to. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned a deep orange, Mark sat on his porch with a cup of tea in his hand. He looked at the stars beginning to twinkle above, lost in his thoughts. The quiet was almost perfect, and for a moment, he felt completely at peace. But that peace was about to be shattered. A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Mark frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone. Who could be out here, so far from town, especially at this hour? He stood up, his heart starting to beat a little faster. The knock came again, more urgent this time. He walked slowly to the door, hesitating for a moment. Maybe it was just someone lost, maybe a traveler in need of help. But why would anyone come all the way out here, especially at night? With a deep breath, Mark opened the door. Standing before him were three women, unlike anyone he had ever seen. They were tall, with glowing skin that shimmered in the dim light, their eyes a strange shade of blue. They were beautiful, but in a way that made him feel both curious and cautious. Their presence felt otherworldly, as if they didn't quite belong to Earth. "We're sorry to bother you," the woman in the middle said, her voice soft and melodic. "Our ship, it crashed nearby. We've been stranded for days. Could you help us? We just need a place to stay for the night." Mark stared at them, unsure of what to say. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. Were they lost travelers? Or was something else going on? But there was something about their eyes, something that made him hesitate. There was no denying that they were different, but he couldn't quite put his finger on why. The woman smiled gently, as if sensing his hesitation. "Please," she said, "we won't be any trouble. We just need somewhere safe to stay until we can figure out what to do." Mark stood there for a moment, unsure. He wasn't used to strangers showing up on his doorstep, especially ones who looked like they had stepped out of a dream or maybe a nightmare. But in the end, his curiosity got the best of him. "All right," he said finally, stepping aside. "You can stay for the night." As the three women stepped inside, Mark felt an odd mixture of excitement and unease. What had he just invited into his home? And why did it feel like his peaceful life was about to be changed forever? The door closed behind them, and the night outside seemed to grow even darker. Inside, the air felt charged, as if something incredible was about to happen. Mark couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something far bigger than he could ever have imagined. The air inside the cabin felt heavier now, almost alive with the strange presence of the three women. Mark closed the door behind them, still trying to process what was happening. His cabin, usually so quiet and still, now felt cramped and unfamiliar. The three women moved gracefully, their movements smooth and almost otherworldly, as if they were floating rather than walking. The woman who had spoken earlier, the one in the middle, stepped forward. She smiled softly at Mark, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "Thank you for letting us in," she said, her voice calming yet somehow carrying an unspoken weight. "We didn't mean to intrude." Mark nodded, unsure of how to respond. "No problem. I just didn't expect visitors." The other two women glanced at each other, and Mark caught the faintest flicker of what might have been a shared secret between them. He couldn't explain it, but there was something about their presence that made him feel like he was being drawn into a story. He didn't quite understand. "We'll make ourselves comfortable," the woman in the middle said, her voice soft but assertive. "We won't stay for long. Just a night. Then we'll be on our way." Mark wasn't sure what to say. Something about her words, her calm assurance, made him feel like this wasn't just an ordinary night. He could sense that whatever was going on, it was far bigger than a simple crash landing or a random encounter. The woman who had spoken last glanced out the window, her eyes scanning the woods as if searching for something. Her gaze lingered for a moment before she turned back to Mark, her expression unreadable. "The stars look different here," she said quietly. "This planet, it's beautiful, but strange." Mark's curiosity was piqued. "You're not from around here, are you?" he asked before he could stop himself. A soft chuckle came from the woman in the middle. "No, we're not from here. We've traveled a long way, but that's a story for another time." Mark watched as the women settled into the small living area. There was an odd tension in the room now, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was more like the calm before a storm, the kind of silence that makes you feel like something is about to shift. The air seemed to hum with energy, and he couldn't help but wonder if it was somehow connected to them. He was about to offer them some food when the woman in the middle stood up and moved toward the window. She stared out at the night for a long moment before speaking again, her voice almost a whisper. "We've been on the run for so long. It's been difficult." Mark was surprised by the sudden vulnerability in her voice. She had been so calm and collected before, but now there was a sense of weariness in her tone. Something about her made him want to understand, to know more. Without thinking, he asked, "What happened? Why are you here?" The room fell silent, and for a long moment, it seemed like no one was going to answer. The tension grew, thick and palpable. Finally, the woman turned to him, her eyes locking with his. "We didn't just crash here," she said slowly. "We're here because we have nowhere else to go. But that's not the only reason." Mark's heart began to race. The air between them seemed to thrum with a strange energy now, and he could feel it, deep inside his bones. Whatever was going on, whatever story they had to tell, he was now a part of it, and there was no turning back. The night stretched on, and the cabin felt alive with an energy Mark couldn't quite place. The three women seemed to settle into the space effortlessly, as though they had always been there, and Mark was merely a temporary visitor in his own home. It was unnerving in the best way, like being caught in a dream where reality and fantasy blended into one. The woman who had spoken first, the leader of the group, had disappeared into the kitchen to prepare a meal. Her movements were fluid, almost graceful, as she moved around the small space. Mark watched her for a moment, unable to shake the feeling that she was somehow different. There was no mistaking the allure in her presence, but it wasn't just physical. It was something deeper, something intangible. She looked up at him from across the room, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "You must be hungry," she said softly. Her voice was soothing, like a melody that tugged at something inside him. "I promise we're not here to cause trouble." Mark nodded, but he couldn't shake the odd sense of curiosity that had settled in his chest. His mind was racing with questions, but none of them seemed appropriate to ask. The air between them crackled with an unspoken tension, and he knew, somehow, that there was more to the situation than just three strangers looking for shelter. There was something else at play here, something he couldn't yet see. As she worked, Mark couldn't help but notice how the two other women interacted with each other. They were speaking in soft, low voices, occasionally glancing at him, but never quite meeting his gaze. It was as though they were trying to communicate something without saying a word. The older one, with her striking features and commanding presence, was the one who seemed the most aware of him, her eyes constantly flickering to him as if trying to gauge his reaction. Mark couldn't help but feel like an outsider in his own home, a passive observer of something far larger than he could comprehend. He had always been comfortable alone, in control of his world and his space. But now, with these alien women in his cabin, everything felt different. The very air seemed charged with anticipation, as if the universe itself was waiting for something to unfold. Finally, dinner was ready. The woman set a small, simple meal in front of Mark, a dish unlike anything he had ever seen. The food shimmered, its colors shifting and changing as he stared at it. Almost hypnotic in its beauty, the woman smiled as he hesitated. "It's safe," she assured him. "You have nothing to worry about." Mark reached out and took a bite. It was unlike anything he had tasted before, a strange combination of flavors that seemed to dance on his tongue, sweet and savory, with an almost electric tinge to it. The moment the food touched his lips, he felt a warmth spread through him, as though the food was not just nourishing his body, but his very soul. As he ate, The older woman sat down across from him, her eyes steady. "You're probably wondering why we're here," she said, her voice low. "What we really want." Mark put down his fork, his heart pounding in his chest. This was at the moment he had been waiting for, though he hadn't realized it until now. The reason they were here, the real reason. Her gaze didn't waver. "You're not just a stranger to us, Mark. You've been chosen." Mark swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. Chosen? Chosen for what? The tension in the room thickened, and for the first time since they had arrived, Mark felt a spark of fear. The unease he had been trying to push aside now flared to life. Whatever this was, whatever they were asking of him, it was far bigger than just three lost travelers seeking shelter. As the weight of her words sank in, Mark couldn't help but feel that his peaceful, solitary life was already slipping through his fingers, and he was powerless to stop it. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across the cabin's walls. Mark sat in his chair, the weight of the woman's words pressing down on him like a heavy fog. "Chosen," she had said, but chosen for what? His mind raced, trying to grasp the meaning of it all, but the more he thought about it, the more his thoughts tangled together in confusion. The room felt colder now, despite the warmth of the fire. The other two women sat silently, their eyes watching him intently. Mark shifted uncomfortably in his seat, unsure of what to say, or even if he should say anything at all. The silence between them was almost suffocating, like a vast chasm that no words could bridge. Finally, the woman who had spoken earlier, the one with the calm and authoritative presence, leaned forward, her gaze never leaving Mark's. "I understand that this is overwhelming," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "But the truth is, you've been a part of something much bigger than yourself for a long time now." Mark's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice a little more forceful than he intended. "What does this have to do with me?" The woman's lips curled into a faint smile, but it was a smile that held no warmth, no comfort. "It's not about what you've done, Mark," she said softly. "It's about what you are. You've always been different." A chill ran through him. "Different," he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. What was she saying? What could she possibly mean by that? She nodded. "We've been watching you for some time. Not just us, but other beings who have been observing the Earth for centuries. You, Mark, have been a part of something much greater than your life in this cabin. Your actions, your choices, they've all been leading to this moment." Mark felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had always known he was different, but he had never considered it in any way other than his own quirks, his own preference for solitude. What was she talking about? What had he done to be a part of something so grand? "Why me?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Why not someone else? What am I supposed to do?" The woman's eyes softened, but there was no hint of pity in her gaze. "It's not about what you need to do," she explained. "It's about what you can do. You've been given a unique gift, Mark, a connection to things beyond this world, beyond the stars. And now you will help us. You will help us save everything." Mark's heart pounded in his chest. His breath came in shallow gasps. The reality of the situation was crashing down on him, and no matter how hard he tried to deny it, he knew this wasn't just some strange encounter, it was something much bigger. His life, the one he had worked so hard to protect, was no longer his own. One of the other women, quiet until now, spoke up. "You've seen the signs, Mark. You've felt the pull, haven't you?" Her voice was low, almost hypnotic. "The dreams, the visions, the feeling that something isn't quite right with the world. It's not just in your head, the dreams." Mark's blood ran cold. He had had strange dreams lately, dreams that felt so real, so vivid, that he often woke up feeling as though he had crossed into another world. He had dismissed them as just his imagination running wild, the byproduct of his loneliness. But now, with these women here, with their cryptic words, he wasn't so sure anymore. "We're here to guide you," the leader said, her voice steady. "We have been watching, waiting for you to understand. You've always had the power to change things. Now it's time for you to do so." Mark's thoughts swirled in a chaotic whirlpool. Change the world. What could he possibly do? He was just a man, living alone in a cabin. But the way the women spoke, with such conviction and certainty, made him wonder if he was indeed capable of something greater. Was this the reason he had lived alone for so long? Was it fate, or something more? The silence in the cabin deepened, and Mark knew one thing for certain. His life was never going to be the same again. Mark stared at the three women, each one more enigmatic than the last. The weight of their words lingered in the air, suffocating him with their implications. He had always lived his life by the rule of self-reliance, of solitude. Now, it seemed that the very foundation of his existence was being pulled out from under him. But what was he supposed to do with this newfound knowledge? Was he really chosen for something greater? Or was this all some elaborate lie? The woman who had first spoken to him, the one who seemed to hold all the answers, stood up and walked toward the window. Her movement was slow, deliberate, as if the room itself was holding its breath. She gazed out into the dark woods, her expression unreadable. The flickering light of the fire cast strange shadows on her face, making her look both distant and familiar at the same time. "You've felt it, haven't you?" she asked, her voice soft, but filled with an intensity that made Mark's skin prickle. "The pull, the whispers at the edges of your mind. It's not just coincidence. It's not just your imagination. You've been preparing for this moment your whole life." Mark clenched his fists. Preparing? For what? She turned to face him, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "For the choice you must make. The choice between continuing your quiet, lonely existence or stepping into something that could change the course of everything. It's not a decision to be taken lightly." Mark shook his head, his thoughts racing. This wasn't real. None of this could be happening. He was just a man, sitting in his cabin, surrounded by strangers who spoke in riddles. But then, a memory surfaced, the strange dreams he'd been having. The feeling that something was wrong with the world, like it was teetering on the edge of something bigger. Had he always known? Or was he just finally seeing what had always been there? "Why me?" he whispered, the words escaping before he could stop them. "Why choose me? What do I have that makes me special?" The woman smiled, a knowing, almost pitying smile. "It's not about being special. It's about what you can become. You have potential, Mark, potential that's been dormant, waiting for the right moment to awaken. And that moment is now." A chill ran through him. He had always been ordinary, a man content with his simple life. He wasn't a hero or a savior or anything of the sort. What could he possibly offer these strange beings from another world? What power did he have that could make a difference? As if reading his thoughts, the woman spoke again, her tone soft but firm. "You have the power to change the world, Mark, but it's not a power you can control just yet. That's why we're here to guide you, to help you unlock the potential you've always had inside you. But you have to be willing to embrace it." Mark took a step back, his mind spinning. He wanted to say no, to shut this all out and return to his peaceful, solitary life. But deep down, he knew he couldn't. There was something inside him, something ancient that was stirring. It wasn't just the allure of the unknown or the mystery of these women. It was something deeper, a force he couldn't deny. For the first time in years, Mark felt a flicker of something he hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. The hope that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't a mistake. Maybe there was a purpose to all of this. But as the fire crackled and the shadows danced on the walls, Mark realized something else. There was no turning back now. The path ahead was uncertain, shrouded in mystery and danger, but it was the only path he could take. The decision had been made for him long before he had even realized it. And so, with a deep breath, Mark made his choice. It was time to step into the unknown. The morning light crept through the small cabin, casting long shadows on the wooden floor. Mark sat by the window, staring out at the dense forest that surrounded his home. It felt different now, unnervingly still, as if the world outside was waiting for something to happen. But inside, the cabin was filled with an unspoken energy, a palpable tension that he couldn't shake. The three women sat quietly at the table, each one deep in thought. They didn't speak much, but their presence was a constant, heavy reminder of the strange turn his life had taken. Mark had barely slept. His mind kept replaying the events of the previous night, the words that had been spoken, and the choices now laid out before him. Could he really embrace this new path? Could he trust these women, these strangers who seemed to know so much about him, yet so little about who he truly was? The leader of the group, the one who had been the most vocal, stood up, and walked toward him. Her gaze was steady, unwavering. "You're still uncertain," she said, her voice calm, but there was an underlying urgency in her tone. "I can see it in your eyes. You're afraid. And you should be." Mark felt a chill run through him, his heartbeat quickening. "Afraid," he repeated, turning to face her. "Why would I be afraid? This isn't real. None of this is real." Her lips curled into a small, knowing smile. "It's real, Mark, more real than you can understand right now. But fear is a natural response when you're faced with the unknown. And trust me, what lies ahead is unlike anything you've ever experienced." She paused for a moment, letting her words sink in. Mark wanted to argue, to push back, but he couldn't find the words. Deep down, he knew she was right. There was a part of him that longed for adventure, for something more than the lonely, quiet life he had built for himself. But the weight of the unknown, the vastness of what she was suggesting, made it all seem impossible. "We didn't come here just for shelter," she continued, her voice softer now. "We came here because we need you. The choices you make from this point on will shape everything. Not just for you, but for all of humanity." Mark's breath caught in his throat. "Humanity?" he repeated, the word tasting foreign on his tongue. "What are you saying? What am I supposed to do?" She stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. "You've always had the power, Mark. You just didn't know it. The connection, the one that's been tugging at you for years, it's real. And now it's time to act on it." Mark could feel his heart pounding in his chest. Everything inside him screamed for him to reject it, to return to the life he knew. But the fire in her eyes, the quiet certainty in her voice, made it impossible to ignore the truth that was beginning to settle in his bones. For the first time in his life, Mark understood he wasn't just a man living in the woods. He was part of something much bigger. And whether he was ready or not, it was time to step into the role he had been chosen for. The morning sun had fully risen now, bathing the cabin in a golden light that felt strangely foreign. Mark stood by the window, gazing at the world outside, but it didn't feel like his world anymore. The trees, the lake, the quiet solitude, everything had changed in an instant. The life he had so carefully built was now just a distant memory, slipping further away with every passing moment. The women were still there, waiting. Their presence, once unsettling, now felt almost inevitable. They had come into his life like a storm, and Mark realized that there was no escaping it, no matter how much he wanted to return to the way things were. The truth was clear, that life was gone, and a new path had already been set in motion. "Mark," the woman said softly, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "You don't have to make this decision alone." He turned to face her, his heart pounding in his chest. "I never asked for this," he said, his voice thick with frustration. "I never wanted any of this. I was fine living my life, alone, away from all the chaos." She took a step toward him, her eyes locking with his. "I know, but sometimes life doesn't ask us what we want. It gives us what we need. And you, Mark, were chosen because you have the strength to change things, to be a part of something far bigger than yourself." Mark clenched his fists at his sides. "What if I don't want to be a part of it? What if I don't want to change anything?" The woman's expression softened, but there was no pity in her gaze. "You already have, whether you realize it or not. Your choices, your actions, have always had consequences, Mark. Now, you can choose to use your power, your knowledge, to make those consequences matter." The words echoed in his mind. Your power, your knowledge. He had never felt powerful. He had always been just a man, alone in his cabin, content in his own isolation. The thought of stepping into something so vast, so important, was terrifying. But the more he listened to her, the more he understood. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about something larger, something that he couldn't even begin to comprehend. A heavy silence hung between them as Mark processed everything she had said. He thought about his past, his dreams, the strange feelings he had always tried to push away. He had ignored them for so long, but now, it was clear they had always been leading him to this moment. Finally, Mark took a deep breath. His chest tightened with the weight of his decision, but deep down, he knew there was only one choice. There was no going back. "I'm ready," he said, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. "I don't know what this means, but I'll do whatever it takes." The woman nodded, her eyes gleaming with a mix of pride and something else, something deeper. "Then it's time to begin." And with that, Mark took his first step into the unknown.